Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Jay Jin Park. I am the project specialist with the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance. And on behalf of the Alliance, our team, um, welcome to today's webinar entitled um, Fighting Ableism. I have the great pleasure of introducing our speakers. Before we do that, just to give you a couple of notes on access. We have a sign language interpreter, ASL interpreter, which you can see on the top of the window. She is spotlighted. If you would like, you can feel free on your end to pin her and move her to whatever's comfortable on your screen. We also have live captioning available. If you want to utilize captioning, you can look at the bottom of your Zoom screen and the little captioning icon. It should be like a little squared off box, and you can turn on captioning and utilize that or activate that. If you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation, feel free to utilize the chat and to make your comments or questions in chat, and we'll get to them throughout or at the end. And Christine, that you heard earlier, will and I will help to kind of monitor that. And without further ado, I am very pleased to introduce our presenters, Timotheus Gordon Jr. or TJ, and Helen Rottier, and Helen hopefully will be joining us shortly as she had some issues this morning. So TJ, please take it away.
All right, good morning, everybody. This is TJ Gordon, and Helen and I will present to you all Fighting Ableism Together. We are in this together, so we will fight ableism together. Next slide, please. And so for today, the goals of this webinar is to give a brief definition of what ableism is and provide examples of how ableism happens in your day-to-day life, whether you work, go to school, or if you just go around about in your neighborhood. It's everywhere. It affects you in any way. We will also try to connect ableism to other things, other forms of oppression, like sexism or racism. By the end of this webinar, you may have more tools to help identify ableism and how to fight ableism as an individual and as a team too. And I will also provide we will also provide some resources on ableism as well at the end. I may not go through all of them, but if you'd like a copy of the presentation with the resource list, feel free to ask any of us for access afterwards. Next slide. So I will introduce Helen. We are both researchers and scholars at the Institute on Disability and Human Development at UIC, or University of Illinois at Chicago. She is a PhD candidate in disability studies. In addition, Helen is also the student coordinator of the Coalition of Autistic and Neurodivergent Students, also known as CANS. And it is a support group for autistic and neurodivergent students in the Chicagoland area. Whether you go to UIC, Northwestern, Chicago State, a city college, any college in the city of Chicago. Next slide. As far as myself, as mentioned before, I am also a researcher at the Institute on Disability and Human Development, but I'm also a person with many hats. In addition to doing research at UIC, I am also an African-American autistic self-advocate from Chicago. And Jen Pak and I are co-founders of Chicagoland Disabled People of Color Coalition, also known as Chicago DPOC. It is a organization for people of color with disabilities in the Chicagoland area who promotes disability pride, acceptance, and inclusion in communities of color throughout the Chicagoland area, whether it's the city, which is our main focus, and the suburbs too. Next slide, please. How can you define ableism? Ableism is a loaded word with many definitions. So for the purposes of today's webinar, we will make it as brief as possible just to give you an idea of what ableism may look like in your daily life. So according to Sin's valid definition, it is the system of discriminatory practices and beliefs that may perpetuate disability oppression. To repeat the definition again, it is the system of discriminatory practices and beliefs that may perpetuate disability oppression. And I like how Helen broke down the definitions. So ableism is systemic, which means it affects all parts of our life and relationships. It could affect how you relate to your family and friends or your loved ones. It affects your work life, your social life, your life as your daily life at school, or when you travel. Ableism is discrimination. Discrimination is unjust treatment based on identity like disability. So just like how racism is unjust treatment based on your ethnicity and race, same thing with ableism. It's an unjust treatment based on your disability. In addition, ableism also happens through ideas and actions. You could do things that could be viewed as ableist, but you could also think or say things that could also discriminate, oppress, and demean people with disabilities as well. Next slide, please. So on the this slide, this is a image of another definition of ableism that comes from T.L. Lewis, in which they are a deaf Black activist who is a part of the Harriet Tubman Collective. I'm a part of that collective too, by the way. But basically, it is an organization of Black disabled activists and self-advocates throughout the nation. And so according to this definition of ableism, it is a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of being normal or what is excellence or desirability and productivity and intelligence. These ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness or racism in general and more. This form of systemic oppression leads to people in society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's language, appearance, religion, and other things, to paraphrase. But the key definition is this: you do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. So let's say you hear things about your brother, your sibling, that has a disability. You may face ableism also because you feeling the effects of how your sibling or loved one is being discriminated against also. And they may talk about you too because of your association with that person. Next slide. All right, so this is the time to speak up and speak out. And so if you want to, we will spend about a few minutes on this part, but if you have any examples you want to share about ableism, whether it's something that you experience personally or stories of other people going for ableism, or it could be examples of somebody you know that experienced ableism, feel free to either talk about it in the chat, or you could also say it as well if you want. And we will spend about 5 minutes sharing.
Thanks, TJ. I can start. So this is Jajin again from the Alliance. I'm have low vision and have lived with seizures or my disabilities. And a couple of examples that I can share is um, I sometimes use a white cane, and I've had experiences where I've over the years of traveling around Chicago, like downtown, I'd be at the corner of say Michigan Avenue and Lake Street and have my white cane out ready to cross the street. And more than once, someone has come up, grabbed my cane without saying hi, and started to like pull me across the street, assuming I wanted to go a certain way, which was a bit shocking. And I think all is just kind of goes to the level of just kind of like the assumption of I didn't know what I was doing. And then I've also had experiences when I've been in meetings or in school, when people realized or I shared that I had a disability, I observed how people's voices got louder, thinking that they needed to talk louder to me, or a few times slowed down their speech um, for some reason, thinking that I needed to, again, kind of because of my vision loss or disability, they need to talk slower. So those are my examples.
This is TJ speaking. I could definitely share a example as well, my personal example. So I'm on the autism spectrum, along with I have a couple other disabilities as well. And so when I go to events related to autism and I come by myself, I will get questions like, well, where's your parents? Is somebody with you? I will say, I'm by myself. And people be amazed, not only that I come to events by myself, but also I contribute to why I contribute to my work and family even. So my experience is that sometimes because because I'm autistic, people assume that I need somebody to speak for me, even though I can speak for myself. Yes, I may have a different way of speaking, vocally or through written word, but I do have the capability to speak for myself. So it's just because I'm autistic doesn't mean that I always need somebody to represent me in all aspects of my life. Is there anyone else would like to give an example before we go to the next slide?
This is Christine, and as TJ said, this is an opportunity to speak up and speak out. If you would like to type in an example that you may have experienced of ableism, you can go ahead and type that in using the chat box. If you would prefer to speak it, you may take yourself off of mute. And another opportunity, you may not have known that something that you have experienced was ableism. And if you'd like to share an example of something you've experienced and ask TJ, was this ableism? Uh, I hope, TJ, you're open to sharing that as well.
Yes, I can be open to it as well. And I see that Tara had posted a article on internalized ableism, in which that will be something that we will definitely talk about soon, because ableism is not only something that could be caused by someone or a place or a system, it can also happen within yourself too. And I myself had examples of us pretty much thinking about my own ableism about myself. All right, I'll give you all, if that's fine with you all, I'll give you all a couple more minutes before we move on to the next slide. So if you like, as Christine mentioned before, if you like to speak out about examples of ableism, you can use the chat box, or just speak through your voice as well.
Hi, this is Adam, and I remember being in school, and a lot of people were like picking on me because of my disability, and I remember how hard it was for me to go through school because some of the classes I didn't really were not really good at, and so it was really frustrating for me to go through it. And so I just wanted to say, I plowed through it and I got everything done and was able to be more successful. So thank you.
This is Christine. Thank you, Adam. And here is a question for you, TJ, that comes through our chat box. Is bullying a form of ableism?
Yes, I definitely agree that bullying can be a form of ableism in both ways. You could be a bully based on, as Anna mentioned, how you were picked on now or before because of your disability, and because of how people treated you in that instance, you let that pain out by doing the same thing to other people. Or, of course, bullying could also come in the form of being on the receiving end as well. Just feeling so sad and scared because people are making fun of you or hurting you to the point where you don't want to accept your disability because everybody keeps saying, well, your disability is weird, or you weird because of your disability. Thank you, Adam, for chiming in, by the way. If you all have if nothing else, then we can move on to the next slide. So before then,
Yes.
Tara,
Yes.
I would
Thank
address what Tara wrote. When I was younger, I passed as non-disabled. It was always shocking when others made negative comments about disabled people. That could happen too, where now that I'm obviously disabled, people treat me differently. I could tell they feel sorry for me. I could understand both, Tara. I could definitely understand both, where even if you either non-disabled but pass for non-disabled, it could still be heartbreaking when you see people with disabilities being mocked, or people make negative comments about disabled people. But then once you identify yourself as disabled, it's also amazing how people treat you differently. And I think also trying to pass for non-disabled could be also a form of ableism as well, which I will talk about momentarily. But thank you for bringing that up, Tara. All right, for time's sake, we will move on to the next slide. So thank you all for your comments and speaking up and speaking out. So ableism is connected to other forms of oppression as well. It's not just something that happens alone. It can be tied to other things. Other forms of oppression could include racism, sexism, LGBTQ plus oppression, or being discriminated against because you decide to look like people other than people of the opposite gender or sex. And there's also fat oppression, so discrimination and mocking about the size and shape of your body. It could not only be fat oppression, but also skinny oppression as well. On both levels, I would like to add that too. All these forms of oppression grant some people power and privilege, while other people are excluded based on who they are. It comes back to how all these isms, I like to call it, are ways of people with power to continue to have power and to continue to be accepted in society, while others who are outside the norms of the people in power are excluded and will face all types of oppressions. Note, we cannot get rid of ableism without fighting other forms of oppression. This also called intersectionality, where all parts of your identity affects your everyday life. It's not just one. You got to consider all that you identify with. And so therefore, fighting for justice means fighting for everyone, including people who are different from us. This is what we call collective liberation. So when we fight for disability rights, disability justice, and inclusion, we fight for everybody in the disability community, not just people with physical disabilities, not just people with different brain wirings, not just people with with a particular belief or race. This means everybody. Next slide, please. So I'm glad some of you all alluded to internalized ableism, which is also a thing to think about also. Even if we are disabled, we could feel ableism towards ourselves and other disabled people. This is called internalized ableism. For instance, there's a time in my life where I didn't want to be associated with autistic people or people with disabilities, because if I associate with quote unquote those people, I would be labeled uncool by my peers. So I had to play by their rules and fit in. So I even myself had moments of internalized ableism where I hated my identity and anything to do with my identity until I challenged it. Challenging our own ableism means paying attention to what we think about disability and how we treat ourselves and other people with disabilities. To challenge those thoughts is not only to pay attention to what we think about disability, but also accepting your disability identity also. Part of that means accepting that identity and treating ourselves with dignity and respect and value. But this also means valuing other people with disabilities, even when other people may not value people with disabilities. Next slide, please. Here are also ways you can identify ableism in your daily life. If you think you are experiencing ableism, ask yourself these following questions. Is someone saying any of the following things about you and your disability, or how you live your life with disability? Is someone saying any of the following things that are negative things about disability, like trigger warning, there may be some slurs I'm about to say, so it will not be repeated. That's so lame. You are so retarded. I don't see it as disabled. We are all disabled in some way. Or you're faking your disability. Those things that you may say would either make fun of the disability, make light of disability, or just outright discriminating. Another way to identify ableism is this. Is someone asking you super personal questions about your disability? So for instance, someone may ask you personal questions about if you could use the bathroom with your disability, or your sex life, or other personal questions that is personal and private. Next slide.
TJ, I actually have a quick question.
Oh, sure.
This is JJ. And, the example that you have, like you're so lame, that comment and the one underneath it, I can see why it may be ableist, but the statements of, oh, I don't see you as disabled, or we're all disabled in some way. Some of the how are those like ableist language? Because I don't see you as disabled. Person might be actually trying to give you a compliment.
I mean, some people may. That's a good question, JJ, and I'm glad you brought that up about the three comments. It may seem positive, but I don't see you as disabled could also mean I don't care about your disability identity. Your identity does not count. It's kind of in the same line as I don't see color, I don't see your race. It may come out as positive, but in another way, it's not positive because it's erasing something that is important to you and an identity that you care about. Similar with you're faking your disability. It could be ableist because it goes along with making fun of disability, or the notion that people claim to be disabled so that they could get ahead, even though disability is not something to fake.
Great, thank you. That helped. Sorry. Thank you. That clarified things.
I understand. It's like lots of things that go on with those words. I think whether it's meant to be positive or meant to be negative, in any case, it's really how those words affects whoever received it. I think that's all I have on that slide. So if you move to the next one. Oh, sorry, go back, sorry. So another way of identifying ableism is someone talking to you like a child instead of an adult, or is someone not allowing you to speak up and speak out for yourself. It goes back to an example I gave about how people expect me to have a companion to speak up for me, even though we as disabled people have the ability to speak up and speak out. It may be written, it may be through our mouths, it may be through signs and other ways of communicating, but any form of communication is valued and our voices matters. So we do have the option to speak up for ourselves, and to take that away is ableist. Now, there is a thing called plain language where you write or speak things in a way that everybody can understand. But for some people, they may understand what you're talking about. So don't automatically talk down to a person just because of disability alone. Is someone denying you the things you need, like accessible bathrooms, audio descriptions, ASL, and other accommodations? Is someone or a group of people separating you and everyone else because you have a disability? We go on and on with many ways we can identify ableism, but these are a few examples that we came up with. All right, next slide, please. So in a guide called Navigating College for people with disabilities, especially those on the autism spectrum, Amanda Vivian writes about ableism awareness. And in ableism awareness, ableism can be unconscious and invisible. Some things with ableism we can see right away, others we cannot, unless we have the tools to identify what's ableist or not. Think about wearing special glasses that can help you spot ableism. Once you have that tool or that special glass, ableism makes you think that you are broken or wrong. So if you see or hear anything that ties to you are broken or wrong because of your disability, that's ableism. Ableism is the belief that there's only one set of abilities, feelings, and experiences that a person can have. If it's one disabled person's experience, it is the experience of all. That's an example of ableism. But as we would like to say in the autistic community, if you heard one story, you heard one story. There are many experiences in the disability community, and we should honor all sets of abilities, feelings, and experiences. Ableism can cause people to treat other people badly if they know a person is disabled. So if there's something or someone that could cause people to treat other people badly, especially if they know ahead of time that they have a disability, that's ableist. Next slide, please. But despite the ways you can identify ableism and the fact that ableism is not only wrong, but just as nasty and disturbing as all the other isms in the world, there are ways that you could fight localism. There are ways you can fight ableism in your local area. There are ways you could fight ableism in your local area or in your state or even within your groups. One way is to talk to your local legislator about the issues that you face as a disabled person. Or if you're a caregiver, then you could talk about the experiences about what your loved one faced also. You could go to your mayor, your township council, your alderman, your state senator, or any local legislator in your area. And you could address not only ableism, but also any discrimination that you face because of your disability. You can also talk about the places that you can go because it is inaccessible. Another way you could fight ableism is to join anti-ableism groups. It could be virtual on a Facebook group or through Zoom, or if you go join a group at a church or library or a local place, also in person. In any business or group that you run, make sure that it is welcoming, inclusive, and accessible for everybody. And to help ensure that it is welcoming, inclusive, and accessible, we suggest adding people with disabilities to be leaders, change maker, and the voices that can help your business and group be welcoming, inclusive, accessible, and anti-ableist. And who could be better providing that voice than the disability community? And as we all say, speak up and speak out. Speak up and speak out. We see ableism, let the person know that what they're doing is ableism, that's ableist, or tell someone that you trust and see if they could address it for you. But we must speak up and speak out against ableism. We must. Next slide, please. That is all that we have for today. We'd like to thank you for your time and support. And Helen and I appreciate the support, and I'm sure she appreciated too from wherever she's at right now. If you'd like to learn more about ableism or battling ableism, refer to the resources in the next 2 slides. I will forewarn you all that some of those resources may not be in plain language. If you come across that resource, ask someone to help you guide through the resource. And that's all that we have for today. We are now, if we do have time, so I could open up for comments, questions, concerns, shout outs. Time to speak out, speak out.
This is Christine Beck, and thank you everyone who has used the chat box to say thank you, TJ. Great presentation. We have another thank you. Awesome job. If you have any questions, comments, contributions that you would like to share during our last couple of minutes together, please go ahead and type them into the chat box, or you are welcome to take yourself off of mute and speak up and speak out that way.
I appreciate you all. No, we appreciate you all, Helen and I. It was a team effort. I just happened to speak, but it was a team effort on both parts.
And we had another comment in the chat box saying, "You rock, TJ."
I try. Appreciate it.
All right, Jay-Jin, would you like to go ahead and close us on out for today?
Sure. Again, so this is Again, and this is Jay June with the Alliance, and on behalf of everybody, thank you all for joining our webinar on fighting ableism. Thank you to TJ and Helen for putting the presentation together and presenting and sharing those insights with us and giving us the information to fight out ableism together, and the information about speaking up and speaking out. You can, if you all have questions, you can contact the Alliance at our website at selfadvocacyalliance.org, or find us on Facebook as well. And again, as the Alliance is also a proud, we're all, pardon me, let me start over again. So again, on behalf of the Alliance, thank you so much. And again, to acknowledge that the Alliance is a initiative and partner of the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities, and we are grateful for their support and ongoing support. And with that, thank you all so much, and stay tuned for future webinars.